The snow fell harder than it had in decades, blanketing the small mountain town of Cedar Ridge in a deadly white silence. Street lights flickered through the blizzard, casting eerie shadows that danced across empty roads. Most humans had barricaded themselves inside their homes, waiting for the storm to pass. Zixthara pressed her scaled body against the concrete wall of an abandoned building, her breath forming small clouds of steam in the frigid air. The young dragon's once brilliant silver scales had dulled to a sickly gray, and ice crystals formed along the edges of her wings. She was barely 300 years old, just a child by dragon standards, and her internal fire burned too weak to keep the killing cold at bay. She had been flying south when the blizzard struck without warning. The storm's fury had torn through her flight path like the claws of an ancient enemy, forcing her down into this strange human settlement. Now, exhaustion weighed her down like chains, and each labored breath sent sharp pain through her chest. The dragon stumbled through the empty streets, her talons scraping against ice-covered asphalt. Human dwellings lined both sides of the road, their windows glowing warmly with interior lights. The sight of that warmth made her chest ache with longing, but she knew better than to approach. Humans feared dragons, and fear made them dangerous. As she rounded a corner, her legs finally gave out. Zixthara collapsed onto the frozen ground, her body shaking uncontrollably. The cold was winning. She could feel her life force dimming like a candle in a hurricane. In the distance, she could hear the rumble of human vehicles, their engines cutting through the howling wind. With tremendous effort, she lifted her head and spotted a structure ahead, a large, rectangular building attached to a human dwelling. Its wide door hung partially open, revealing darkness within. A garage, her draconic knowledge told her, a place where humans stored their mechanical beasts. Using the last of her strength, Zixthara dragged herself toward the opening. The concrete floor felt marginally warmer than the ice outside, and the walls blocked the worst of the wind. She curled into the smallest ball possible, wrapping her wings around her body like a tattered blanket. Her eyes began to drift closed when she heard footsteps approaching. Fear shot through her weakened body like lightning. A human was coming. She tried to move deeper into the shadows, but her muscles refused to obey. The footsteps grew closer, accompanied by the soft whisper of fabric against fabric. A beam of light cut through the darkness, and Zixthara squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for the inevitable screams, the calls for help, the weapons that would surely follow. Instead, she heard something impossible, a sharp intake of breath, followed by worried muttering. "Oh no," came a gentle voice. "What have we here?" The light grew brighter, and Zixthara felt warmth approaching. Not the artificial warmth of human technology, but something deeper. Something that felt like safety itself was drawing near. Against every instinct screaming at her to flee, she opened one golden eye. A human male knelt a few feet away, holding a small light device. He appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His clothing suggested he worked with his hands, sturdy pants, and a thick sweater covered by a heavy jacket. Most remarkably, his face showed no fear, only concern. "You're hurt," he said softly, as if speaking to a frightened animal. "And you're freezing." Marcus Chen had lived in Cedar Ridge for 37 years, ever since retiring from his engineering job in the city. He had chosen this quiet mountain town specifically because strange things happened here, and the locals had learned to mind their own business. He had seen enough unexplained phenomena over the decades to know that the world held wonders most people never imagined. But he had never seen anything like this. The creature before him was clearly a dragon, though much smaller than the massive beasts described in ancient legends. Her scales, dulled by cold and exhaustion, still held hints of silver brilliance. Her wings, folded tightly against her body, showed delicate membrane patterns that reminded him of stained glass windows. She was beautiful, and she was dying. "Easy there," Marcus whispered, moving slowly closer. "I'm not going to hurt you." The dragon's eye tracked his movement, intelligence burning bright within that golden orb. She understood him, he was certain of it. The recognition sparked something in Marcus's chest, a protective instinct he hadn't felt since his daughter was small. "My name is Marcus," he continued, settling cross-legged on the cold floor. "This is my garage. You picked a good spot. It's not much, but it's warmer than outside." Thera watched the human with growing amazement. His voice carried no threat, no aggression. If anything, she detected notes of genuine worry and kindness. Such behavior contradicted everything she had been taught about the human species. Dragons were solitary creatures by nature, raised to be self-sufficient and suspicious of other beings. Her mother had filled her head with warnings about humans, their tendency toward violence, their fear of anything different, their primitive technology that somehow made them dangerous, despite their physical limitations. Yet this human sat before her without weapons, speaking in soothing tones as if she were a treasured friend rather than a potentially deadly predator. "You're probably wondering why I'm not running away screaming," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Truth is, I've lived in this town long enough to know that remarkable things happen here. We get all sorts of unusual visitors, some from other worlds, some from other times, some from places that don't exist on any map." He shifted slightly, and Thera tensed, ready to defend herself despite her weakness. Marcus noticed immediately, and froze. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently. "I'm just reaching for something that might help." Moving with deliberate slowness, Marcus pulled a thermos from his jacket pocket. The sound of liquid sloshing inside made Thera's throat burn with thirst. When had she last drunk anything? "Hot chocolate," Marcus explained, unscrewing the cap. "My wife's recipe. She always said it could cure anything: colds, heartbreak, even existential dread." His voice caught slightly on the mention of his wife, a hint of old sadness that Thera's sensitive hearing picked up easily. Steam rose from the thermos, carrying with it the rich scent of chocolate and something else, cinnamon, maybe vanilla. The aroma alone seemed to warm the air around them. Marcus poured some of the liquid into the thermos cap, creating a small bowl. "I don't know if dragons drink hot chocolate," he said, holding out the improvised cup. "But the principle is sound. Warm liquids raise your core temperature." Thera stared at the offering, her mind reeling. No creature had ever offered her sustenance freely, without expecting something in return. Even among her own kind, every interaction carried the weight of obligation and debt. "You're safe here," Marcus whispered, and those simple words shattered something deep inside her chest. Safe. When had she ever been safe? Her parents had abandoned her as soon as she could fly, as was dragon custom. She had spent her entire short life wandering from territory to territory, never welcome anywhere for long. The concept of safety had become as foreign to her as the warmth of a mother's embrace. Slowly, carefully, Thera extended her neck toward the cup. Her forked tongue flicked out, testing the liquid's temperature. It was hot enough to burn a human's mouth, but perfect for a creature whose throat normally channeled fire. The taste exploded across her senses, rich, sweet, complex, in ways that her usual diet of raw fish and small game could never match. The warmth spread through her body like liquid sunlight, and for the first time in hours, the deadly chill began to retreat from her core. She lifted her head to look at Marcus directly, trying to convey gratitude in the only way she could. A soft, musical sound emerged from her throat, not quite a purr, not quite a song, but something uniquely draconic that meant thanks. Marcus's face lit up with wonder. "You're welcome," he said simply. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small garage, something miraculous was taking place. A bond was forming between two species that had been enemies since the dawn of time, not through conquest or domination, but through the simple act of one being offering kindness to another in need. Marcus settled in to wait out the storm, determined to keep watch over his unexpected guest. Thera curled a little less tightly, some of the tension leaving her muscles as exhaustion finally claimed her. For the first time in her young life, she slept without fear. Dawn broke gray and cold over Cedar Ridge, the storm having finally exhausted itself during the night. Marcus stirred from his uncomfortable position against a tool cabinet, his back aching from sleeping upright in the garage. He had dozed fitfully, waking every hour to check on his draconic guest and add more hot liquid to her improvised bowl. Thera lay exactly where she had collapsed the night before, but her breathing was deeper now, more regular. The deathly pallor had left her scales, and they had begun to regain some of their natural luster. Marcus smiled, relief flooding through him. She was going to survive. As if sensing his attention, the young dragon's eyes opened slowly. For a moment, confusion flickered in those golden depths as she took in her surroundings. Then memory returned, and she lifted her head to look at the human who had saved her life. "Good morning," Marcus said softly. "How are you feeling?" Zixthara tested her limbs carefully, surprised to find strength returning to muscles that had been on the verge of complete failure just hours ago. The human's strange warm liquid had done more than merely provide heat, it had somehow accelerated her body's natural healing processes. She attempted to stand, legs trembling with the effort. Marcus immediately moved closer, hands outstretched in case she fell, then stopped himself. He sensed that this proud creature needed to accomplish this on her own. After several attempts, Zixthara managed to rise to her full height. She was larger than Marcus had initially realized. Her shoulder reached nearly to his chest when she stood upright, and her wingspan, if fully extended, would stretch across the entire garage. Yet despite her size, she moved with delicate precision, careful not to knock over any of the tools or equipment scattered throughout the space. "That's better," Marcus said encouragingly. "You had me worried there for a while." The dragon tilted her head, studying his face intently. Her species possessed an innate ability to read emotional resonance in other beings, and what she sensed from this human continued to baffle her. No deception, no hidden agenda, no fear masquerading as kindness. Just genuine concern for her well-being. Marcus moved to a workbench and began gathering supplies. "I imagine you're hungry. I don't have anything that would appeal to a dragon's usual diet, but I can offer eggs and bacon. Protein is protein, right?" He had set up a small camping stove in the corner of the garage years ago, originally for those winter days when he wanted to work on projects without heating the entire space. Now it served a more unusual purpose, as he prepared breakfast for himself and a mythical creature. The smell of cooking food filled the garage, and Zixthara's stomach responded with a sound that would have been embarrassing if not for Marcus's tactful pretense of not hearing it. When he offered her a plate of scrambled eggs and crispy bacon, she accepted it gratefully. Eating human food felt strange at first. Her kind typically consumed their prey raw and whole, but the flavors were surprisingly pleasant. The eggs were creamy and rich, seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify but found appealing. The bacon provided a satisfying saltiness that complemented the eggs perfectly. "My wife Elena taught me to cook," Marcus explained as they ate. "She said a man who couldn't feed himself properly was only half a person. Took her 3 years to break me of my bachelor habit of living on frozen dinners and takeout." He gestured to a framed photograph on the workbench, a woman with kind eyes and silver hair, smiling beside a much younger version of Marcus. "She passed 5 years ago. Cancer. But her recipes live on." Zixthara recognized the note of grief in his voice, the way it colored his words with both sadness and love. Her species didn't typically form lasting pair bonds the way humans did, but she could sense the depth of connection that had existed between these two beings. It made his kindness toward her even more remarkable. He knew what loss felt like, yet still chose to help a stranger. As they finished eating, voices could be heard from outside. Marcus frowned, moving to peer through one of the garage's small windows. A group of people had gathered in his driveway, their faces showing a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Marcus," called out Sarah Williams, his next-door neighbor. "We saw the lights in your garage all night. Is everything all right?" Zixthara tensed, preparing to hide, but Marcus placed a gentle hand near her wing. "Trust me," he whispered. "These people are good." He opened the garage door partially, stepping into the gap to block the view inside. "Morning, Sarah. Just working on a project that couldn't wait." "In a blizzard?" Tom Richardson, the local hardware store owner, sounded skeptical. "Marcus, you're not as young as you used to be. What if something had happened?" "I appreciate the concern," Marcus replied, "but I'm fine. Actually, I could use your help with something. Remember those stories old Pete Hawkins used to tell about the unusual visitors we sometimes get in this town?" The group exchanged glances, Pete Hawkins had been Cedar Ridge's unofficial historian and keeper of secrets until his death the previous year. His tales of strange beings seeking refuge in their mountain community had been dismissed by outsiders as tall tales, but locals knew better. "What kind of visitor?" asked Dr. Jennifer Park, the town's veterinarian. Her tone suggested she had already guessed the nature of Marcus's situation. "The kind that needs medical attention and absolute discretion," Marcus said carefully. "Young, injured, and very, very lost." Dr. Park stepped forward, her professional instincts overriding her caution. "May I see?" Marcus hesitated, then looked back at Zixthara. The dragon had been listening intently to the conversation, her enhanced hearing allowing her to catch every nuance of emotion in the humans' voices. She sensed no hostility from the group, only curiosity and the same protective instinct that had driven Marcus to help her. Slowly, Zixthara moved into view behind Marcus. The gathered humans fell silent, eyes widening as they took in her silver scales, elegant features, and unmistakably draconic nature. Several hands moved instinctively to phones, but Dr. Park's sharp voice stopped them. "No photos," she said firmly. "No social media. No phone calls to news stations or government agencies. We all know what happens to beings like this. When the outside world gets involved." Everyone nodded. Cedar Ridge had learned long ago that some secrets were worth protecting. Tom Richardson whistled low. "She's beautiful. And young. From the look of her." "She?" Dr. Park asked. "Dragons have subtle sexual dimorphism," Marcus explained. "Females have slightly more delicate bone structure, and their scales show more iridescence. Plus, she responded to feminine pronouns." Dr. Park approached slowly, her veterinary training evident in her careful, non-threatening movements. "May I examine you?" she asked Zixthara directly. "I specialize in treating unusual animals, though I admit you're outside my normal experience." Zixthara considered the request. Everything about these humans confounded her expectations. They showed no fear, made no attempts to capture or harm her, and seemed genuinely concerned for her welfare. Such behavior was unprecedented in her limited experience with other species. She nodded carefully, and Dr. Park began a thorough but gentle examination. Her hands were warm and sure as she checked for injuries, tested reflexes, and examined the membrane structure of Zixthara's wings. "Mild hypothermia, some dehydration, and exhaustion," Dr. Park announced. "But she's recovering well. Whatever you gave her last night probably saved her life." "Hot chocolate," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Elena's recipe." Sarah Williams stepped forward. "What does she need?" "Food? Shelter? We can help. The garage is warm enough for now," Marcus replied. "But she'll need more substantial meals as her strength returns. And eventually, she'll want to continue her journey." Zixthara listened to this conversation with growing amazement. These humans were organizing to help her as if she were a lost child rather than a potentially dangerous predator. Such cooperation between species was supposedly impossible, according to everything she had been taught. "I can provide fish," offered Captain Rodriguez from the local marina. "Fresh catch comes in every morning. And I've got space heaters if needed," added Tom Richardson. Dr. Park made notes in a small notebook. "I'll prepare some vitamin supplements to help with her recovery. Dragons are probably like large reptiles in some ways. They'll need specific nutrients to maintain their health in this climate." The group began making plans, each person volunteering resources and assistance without being asked. Zixthara watched in fascination as they transformed from curious neighbors into a coordinated support network. No dragon clan had ever shown such immediate, unquestioning cooperation. As the morning wore on, more townspeople arrived. Word was spreading through Cedar Ridge's close-knit community, but rather than panic or demands for the dragon's removal, each new arrival brought offers of help. Mary Chen brought homemade soup, in case dragons could eat people food. The teenage Peterson twins arrived with armloads of blankets, because everyone deserves to be warm. By noon, the garage had been transformed into a comfortable recovery space. Space heaters hummed quietly in the corners, providing steady warmth, Soft blankets created a nest-like area where Zixthara could rest comfortably. A small refrigerator held a variety of foods, from fresh fish to experimental dragon-appropriate meals, prepared by the town's amateur cooks. Zixthara settled into her new surroundings, overwhelmed by the generosity she had received. These humans had shown her more kindness in 12 hours than she had experienced in her entire previous existence. They asked for nothing in return, expected no payment or service, and treated her safety as their shared responsibility. Marcus sat beside her as the crowd finally dispersed, leaving them alone again. "This must be confusing for you," he said gently. "I imagine your people have taught you that humans are dangerous." Zixthara nodded slowly. "Some of us are," Marcus admitted, "but not all. Here in Cedar Ridge, we've learned that the universe is full of wonders, and most of them just want to live in peace. We've had visitors from other worlds, other dimensions, other times. Some stay, some move on, but all are welcome while they're here." He leaned back against the workbench, his expression thoughtful. "You know, you're the first dragon we've hosted. That makes you pretty special." The young dragon felt something warm unfurling in her chest, a sensation she had no name for because she had never experienced it before. Belonging. Acceptance. The radical notion that she might be valued simply for existing, rather than for what she could provide or how well she could defend herself. For the first time since leaving her birth nest, Zixthara began to understand what the word home might actually mean. 3 weeks passed like a gentle dream. Zixthara had never experienced anything like the rhythm of life in Cedar Ridge, the quiet mornings with Marcus as he puttered around his workshop, the steady stream of visitors bringing gifts and checking on her recovery, the evening conversations that stretched late into the night. Her strength had returned completely, her scales now gleaming with their full silver brilliance. She had grown more comfortable with human customs, learning to appreciate their cooked foods, and even developing a fondness for Marcus's evening ritual of hot tea and storytelling. In return, she had shared stories of her own tales of distant lands, ancient magic, and the secret places where dragons gathered to sing to the stars. But as her health improved, the weight of an unfinished journey began to press against her consciousness. She had been traveling south when the storm caught her, seeking the Great Gathering, a once-in-a-century event where dragons from across the world came together to share knowledge and renew their ancient bonds. Missing it would mean waiting another 100 years for the next opportunity. Marcus sensed her growing restlessness. He had noticed how she gazed southward through the garage windows, her neck craned as if listening to some distant call. During their evening conversations, she had grown quieter, more thoughtful. "You're thinking about leaving," he said one evening as they shared their customary tea. It wasn't a question. Zixthara nodded slowly, then made a sound that approximated human speech, a skill she had been practicing with Dr. Park's help. The words came out carefully shaped but unmistakably draconic in their musical quality. "Must. Go. Gathering. Calls." Over the past weeks, she had learned enough English to communicate basic concepts, though complex ideas still required the mixture of gestures, sounds, and emotional projection that served as her native language. Marcus smiled sadly. "I figured as much. The world is calling, and you're strong enough to answer now." She looked at him with those golden eyes, and Marcus saw conflict there. Gratitude warred with duty, contentment with wanderlust, the pull of an ancient calling against the comfort of the first real home she had ever known. "We've prepared for this," Marcus continued gently. "Dr. Park has put together a travel pack with medical supplies and nutrition supplements. Tom Richardson found weather gear that might fit your frame, and Sarah Williams insisted on packing food for the journey, though I suspect dragon digestion can handle longer fasts than human stomachs. The kindness of these preparations made Zixthara's chest tight with emotion. Even planning for her departure, they continued to care for her welfare. That night, the entire town gathered in the community center for what they called a farewell feast. Tables groaned under the weight of dishes, both familiar and experimental traditional human foods, alongside carefully researched attempts at dragon cuisine. The Hendersons had somehow acquired a whole salmon, which they presented to Zixthara with great ceremony. Maria Santos had spent days perfecting a recipe for fire-spiced vegetables that wouldn't overwhelm human palates but might appeal to draconic tastes. The young dragon found herself overwhelmed by the attention and care. Dragons were not social creatures by nature, and the concept of community celebration was foreign to her. Yet as she watched these humans laugh and share stories, passing dishes and including her in every conversation, she began to understand the power of belonging that extended beyond individual bonds. Children who had initially been frightened now approached with drawings they had made of her. Carefully detailed pictures that showed her silver scales and elegant wings with artistic enthusiasm. The teenage Peterson twins had composed a song about her arrival, which they performed with guitars and voices that harmonized beautifully. Even the town's elderly residents, who had seemed most skeptical of harboring a dragon, brought gifts and well wishes for her journey. "You've changed us," said Mayor Garrett in a brief speech. "Cedar Ridge has always been a sanctuary for the unusual and displaced, but you're the first being who has truly become one of us. You're not just a guest anymore, you're family." The word family hit Zixthara like a physical blow. Dragons didn't have families in any meaningful sense. They had genetic connections, territorial alliances, breeding partnerships, but nothing like the web of care and obligation and unconditional support she had witnessed in this human community. She rose to her full height and, in halting English supplemented by musical draconic tones, delivered her own speech. "Humans. Give gift. No name for in dragon tongue. You. Make Zixthara understand. Home feeling. Heartwarm. Will carry. Always." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Perfect flying weather. The entire town gathered in the park at the edge of Cedar Ridge to see her off. Marcus stood at the front of the crowd, holding a small package wrapped in weather-resistant material. "Elena's hot chocolate recipe," he explained as he handed it to her. "And some tea blend she used to make. For when you find yourself far from home and need to remember that you're never alone." Zixthara accepted the package with reverence, securing it carefully in the travel pack Dr. Park had designed for her. The pack itself was a marvel of engineering, lightweight but strong, designed to fit her draconic frame without interfering with flight, filled with supplies and mementos from her time in Cedar Ridge. She turned to address the gathered crowd one final time. Over the past weeks, her English had improved dramatically, though it still carried the musical cadence of her native tongue. "Thank you. All. Before. Zixthara was. Alone dragon. Scared. Cold. Now. Know what it means. To have. Clan that chooses. Human clan. Will remember. Always. Will tell other dragons. Humans can be. Good. Very good. 44. Amination. Very good." She began the transformation that prepared her for flight, wings unfurling to their full span, muscles flexing, internal fire building to provide lift and warmth. But before launching herself skyward, she did something unprecedented. Zixthara approached each person in the crowd, touching them gently with her snout in a gesture of farewell that conveyed more than words could express. To Marcus, she offered the deepest bow of respect her kind could give, wings spread wide and head lowered nearly to the ground. "You saved more than life," she told him. "You saved soul." Then, with a powerful downstroke of her wings, she launched herself into the crystal blue sky. The people of Cedar Ridge watched until she was just a silver speck against the mountains, then slowly dispersed back to their daily lives. Marcus stood watching longest, a smile on his face despite the sadness of parting. 6 months later, he was working in his garage when shadows passed overhead. Looking up, he saw not one but 3 dragons circling the town, Zixthara and 2 companions, their scales glinting in the afternoon sun. They landed in the park with practiced grace, and within minutes the entire town was gathered to welcome them. "Brought friends," Zixthara announced proudly. "Told them about human clan that shows kindness to strangers. They wanted to see." The 2 new dragons, one gold, one deep emerald, watched the approaching humans with cautious curiosity. They had clearly expected fear, aggression, perhaps weapons. Instead, they found children running up with flowers, adults offering food, elderly residents settling into lawn chairs to watch the proceedings with delighted expressions. My brother, Korax then, Zixthara introduced the gold dragon, and friend, Velandra, indicating the emerald female, told them human stories they not believe. Until now, Dr. Park immediately began her examination routine, checking the newcomers for any health issues with the same professional care she had shown Zixthara. Tom Richardson started taking measurements for additional shelter spaces. Sarah Williams disappeared to organize an impromptu feast. Marcus approached Zixthara with wonder. The gathering, how did it go? Her eyes sparkled with excitement. Told all dragons. About Cedar Ridge. About human kindness. Some not believe. But some curious. Some want to learn. She gestured toward her companions, who were now being gently swarmed by fascinated humans offering everything from fresh fish to flower garlands. Korax, then, was skeptical. Velandra was frightened, but agreed to see. Now, she paused, watching her brother accept a cup of hot chocolate from an enterprising teenager. Now they understand what Zixthara learned. Kindness creates kindness. Trust builds trust. Over the following days, word spread through the draconic community. Cedar Ridge became a pilgrimage site of sorts, a place where dragons could experience something their species had never known. Unconditional welcome from another sentient race. Not all dragons who came were ready for such radical acceptance. Some remained too suspicious, too bound by ancient prejudices, but enough stayed, enough learned, enough carried the message back to their distant homes that something fundamental began to shift in the relationship between the species. Marcus installed additional heating in his garage and built workshops where dragons could practice human crafts while humans learned about draconic arts. Dr. Park opened a specialized clinic for treating draconic ailments. The town expanded its cultural festivals to include dragon song competitions and aerial dance performances. Years passed. Zixthara became Cedar Ridge's first permanent dragon resident, building a lair in the caves above the town while maintaining her friendship with Marcus and the human community. She served as translator and cultural bridge, helping other dragons integrate into the strange new world of interspecies cooperation. The town grew famous in certain circles not as a tourist destination, but as proof that ancient enmities could be healed through simple acts of compassion. Scholars came to study their model of integration. Diplomats sought their advice for other interspecies conflicts. But mostly, they simply continued being themselves. A small mountain community that had learned to see differences as gifts rather than threats. On winter evenings, when snow fell softly over Cedar Ridge, Marcus and Zixthara would sit in the garage where they had first met. They would share tea and stories, remembering that terrible blizzard night when a freezing young dragon had sought shelter and found something infinitely more valuable than warmth. She had found home. They all had. And in a universe often marked by fear and misunderstanding between different species, Cedar Ridge stood as a beacon of hope, proof that with enough kindness, courage, and hot chocolate, any barrier could be overcome.